Hi friends, Ignou MEG1 Assignment with Questions and Answers 2026. Assignment MEG1 British Poetry. It's for 2026 session. Based on blocks 1 to 10, marks 100, answer all questions. Explain any two of the excerpts of poems given below with reference to their context. First one. A poor wideway some deal step in age was whilom dwelling in a Norway cottage beside a grove stondage in a dale. This wideway of which I tell you my tale. Answer. The given lines are taken from Geoffrey Chaucer's The Nun's Priest's Tale, one of the Canterbury Tales. These lines appear at the very beginning of the tale and introduce the setting and background before the main story of the animals begins. In this passage, Chaucer describes a poor widow some deal step in age, meaning she is somewhat old. She lives alone in a small, narrow cottage situated beside a grove in a valley. The description is simple and realistic, reflecting the ordinary life of a medieval peasant woman. Chaucer carefully presents details of her surroundings to create a natural and believable setting. This widow is not a noble woman or a wealthy character, but a humble figure representing simplicity, poverty, and contentment. The context of this description is important because the Nun's Priest's Tale is a beast fable and a mock heroic tale. After this realistic opening, the story shifts to animals, especially the rooster Chanticleer, who behaves like a human being and speaks in grand, elevated language. The humble setting of the widow's cottage strongly contrasts with the later mock epic style used to describe the rooster and his adventures. By beginning the tale in this way, Chaucer prepares the reader for satire. The simple life of the widow highlights the exaggeration and pride shown later by the animal characters. It also grounds the tale in everyday reality, making the later philosophical discussions about dreams, fate, and flattery more humorous and meaningful. Thus, this passage sets the scene, establishes a realistic background, and creates a sharp contrast with the elevated style that follows. It plays a key role in introducing the themes and tone of the Nun's Priest's Tale. Second question. At length they all to merry London came. To merry London, my most kindly nurse, that to me gave this life's first native source, though from another place I take my name. Answer. The given excerpt is from Edmund Spenser's poem Prothalomeon. In this poem, Spenser celebrates the forthcoming marriage of two ladies of the noble Somerset family. The lines occur at the opening of the poem where the poet sets the scene and introduces the emotional background from which the celebration arises. In these lines, Spenser speaks of his arrival in London, affectionately called it Merry London, and describing it as his most kindly nurse. By this metaphor, his struggles suggest that although he may not have been born in London, the city nurtured and shaped his intellectual and poetic life. London is portrayed as a caring foster mother who provided him with his life's first native source, meaning his education, opportunities, and poetic inspiration. The phrase, though from another place I take my name, acknowledges that Spenser's family origins lie elsewhere, yet his true growth and identity as a poet were formed in London. The tone is one of gratitude and affection. By personifying London as a benevolent nurse, Spencer elevates the city from a mere geographical location to a life giving presence. This opening also establishes the emotional contrast of the poem. The poet begins in a reflective and somewhat subdued mood before moving toward the joyful celebration of marriage. Thus, the passage provides important context for the poem. It situates the poet personally within London, highlights his emotional attachment to the city, and prepares the reader for the ceremonial and festive themes that follow. Through this introduction, Spencer blends personal reflection with public celebration, a characteristic feature of Protholomean. Critically evaluate the following poems. 20 marks, 10 mark each. First question, The Garden. Andrew marvels The Garden is a richly meditative poem that explores the tension between human ambition and the restorative power of nature. Written in the metaphysical tradition, the poem rejects social striving, love, fame, and political success in favor of contemplative solitude. Marvel presents the garden as a space of spiritual and intellectual freedom, contrasting it with the corruption and restlessness of public life. The poem is notable for its sensuous imagery. Marvel's descriptions of fruits, shade, and greenery appeal strongly to the senses, creating an atmosphere of abundance and calm. However, this sensual pleasure is not merely physical, it becomes a gateway to higher contemplation. The mind, liberated from worldly distractions, annihilates all that's made, suggesting a paradoxical transcendence achieved through withdrawal rather than action. Classical and biblical allusions deepen the poem's intellectual texture. References to figures such as Apollo and Pan, alongside the implicit presence of Eden, situate the garden as both a mythic and spiritual ideal. Yet, Marvel subtly critiques even the Edenic narrative by suggesting that solitude rather than companionship offers the highlight state of innocence and peace, an unconventional and provocative stance. Formally, the poem's controlled iambic tetrameter and balanced couplets mirror the harmony Marvel finds in nature. Nonetheless, the poem is not without tension. Its dismissal of human relationships may seem escapist or self-indulgent. Despite this, the garden remains a compelling reflection on the limits of ambition and the possibility of inner fulfillment through contemplative retreat, making it as one of the Marvel's most philosophically resonant works. Second question, The Blessed Damozel. Dante Gabriel Rossetti's The Blessed Damozel is a quintessential pre-Raphaelite poem that explores love, separation, and spiritual longing through a fusion of religious imagery and intense emotional subjectivity. The poem presents a young woman in heaven gazing down towards earth, yearning for reunion with her lover. This inversion of the traditional earthly mourner allows Rossetti to examine love from both a celestial and human perspective, blurring the boundary between the sacred and the sensual. The poem's imagery is central to its effect. Rossetti employs rich visual and symbolic details, golden hair, lilies, stars, and angels, to construct a heaven that is ascetic rather than doctrinal. Heaven appears less as a place of divine transcendence and more as an extension of earthly desire. This has been both praised for its emotional intensity and criticized for its unorthodox portrayal of spiritual life, where romantic love rivals devotion to God. Structurally, the poem's regular stanzas and musical repetition mirror the damosel's obsessive longing. The refrain, like "Return to her waiting," emphasizes the emotional stasis of the speaker, reinforcing the pain of separation. Rossetti's language is deliberately simple yet evocative, contributing to the dreamlike and suspended quality of the poem. However, the poem's sentimentality has drawn criticism. The damosel's passive waiting can be read as idealized and limiting, reflecting Victorian notions of feminine devotion. Despite this, the blessed damosel remains a powerful exploration of love's endurance beyond death. Its blend of eroticism, spirituality, and melancholy exemplifies the pre-Raphaelite aim to unite beauty and emotion, securing its lasting literary significance. Next, 20 marks question. Discuss the poem The Triumph of Life in the light of the opinion that Shelley achieves the sublime. Answer. Percy Bysshe Shelley's The Triumph of Life powerfully justifies the opinion that Shelley achieves the sublime, though he does so in a dark, troubling, and radically modern form, unlike the serene transcendence often associated with the romantic sublimity. Shelley's final unfinished poem presents the sublime as overwhelming, disorienting, and morally unsettling. Through visionary imagery, vast allegorical scope, and an intense confrontation with human limitation, Shelley evokes a sublime experience rooted in terror, excess, and existential awe. In classical and romantic aesthetics, particularly in Burke and Kant, the sublime arises from encounters with forces so immense that they exceed human comprehension, producing fear, astonishment, and exaltation. The Triumph of Life embodies this condition from its opening lines. The speaker is confronted with a blinding light that is both radiant and destructive. This light does not illuminate truth in a confronting way. Rather, it dazzles and overwhelms, suggesting a sublime power that annihilates clarity. Shelley's light recalls the Kantian sublime, where reason strains against what cannot be fully grasped, revealing both human limitation and the magnitude of what transcends it. The poem's central allegory, the vast chariot of life crushing humanity beneath its wheels, further intensifies this sublime effect. Life is personified not as a nurturing force, but as an irresistible, tyrannical power before which individuals, thinkers, and even historical giants are rendered helpless. Kings, philosophers, warriors, and poets march in an endless procession of the defeated. The sheer scale of this vision, encompassing all of human history and aspiration, creates a sense of cosmic vastness that is central to the sublime. The reader is forced to confront the terrifying possibility that human ideals, truth, freedom, beauty, are ultimately powerless against life's dominion. Shelley's use of Rousseau as a prophetic guide deepens the sublime complexity of the poem. Rousseau, once a champion of natural goodness and liberty, appears broken and haunted, embodying the failure of Enlightenment faith in progress. His fragmented wisdom and tortured consciousness reflect a sublime crisis, that collapse of reassuring systems of meaning in the face of an incomprehensible reality. This confrontation with intellectual and moral ruin evokes a tragic sublimity grounded in loss rather than triumph. Importantly, the poem's unfinished state enhances its sublimity. The fragmentary ending leaves the reader suspended in uncertainty, mirroring the speaker's unresolved quest for meaning. This incompleteness reflects the romantic belief that ultimate truth is inaccessible and that the sublime lies precisely in this confrontation with the infinite and unknowable. In The Triumph of Life, Shelley moves beyond the optimistic idealism of his earlier works to present a darker, more complex vision of existence by combining visionary intensity, philosophical pessimism, and overwhelming imagery. Shelley achieves a sublime that is both intellectually and emotionally devastating. The poem does not console or resolve. Instead, it compels the reader to confront the terrifying magnitude of life itself, thereby fulfilling one of the highest aims of the romantic sublime. Fourth question. Discuss Yeats' use of history in his poem Easter 1916 and Lapis Lazuli. 20 marks question. Answer. W.B. Yeats' poetry often engages deeply with history, using it both as a source of reflection and as a lens through which he examines the human experience. In Easter 1916 and Lapis Lazuli, Yeats employs historical events and cultural memory, but he does so in markedly different ways, reflecting his evolving concerns with the national identity, morality, and the enduring significance of art. In Easter 1916, Yeats confronts a defining moment in Irish history, the failure uprising against British rule. The poem is both elegiac and contemplative, blending political history with personal reflection. Yeats immortalizes the revolutionaries by transforming the terrible beauty of their sacrifice into a symbolic, almost mythic event. Through lines that repeat the refrain, "A terrible beauty is born," he emphasizes the paradox of historical change. It is both violent and generative. History for Yeats is not merely a chronicle of events, but a moral and spiritual crucible in which ordinary individuals are transformed in symbols of national identity. The poet grapples with the tension between admiration for their courage and his awareness of the tragic consequences, suggesting that historical acts acquire meaning through human remembrance and poetic mediation. In contrast, Lapis Lazuli takes a broader, more philosophical approach to history. Here, Yeats reflects on the impermanence of human achievement and the continuity of human suffering through the lens of art. Inspired by the ancient Chinese art of lapis lazuli inlays, the poem situates historical events, specifically the horrors of war and political upheaval, within a universal, almost cosmic perspective. Yeats juxtaposes the sufferings of humanity with the enduring beauty of artistic creation, implying that history is cyclical and recurring, but that art provides a stabilizing, transcendent record. Unlike the immediacy of Easter 1916, where history is a personal and political engagement, Lapis Lazuli situates history within a philosophical mediation, exploring how human consciousness interprets and immortalizes suffering across time. In both poems, Yeats uses history to probe deeper questions about memory, mortality, and meaning. In Easter 1916, history is intimate and national, tied to personal observation and patriotic reflection. In Lapsus Lazuli, history becomes a canvas for exploring the interplay between human fragility and artistic performance. Together, they demonstrate Yeats' capacity to weave historical reality with poetic vision. In one, the poet responds to an immediate political moment, and in the other, the contemplates humanity's place within the vast continuum of time. Both poems underscore that history, while recording events, also gains significance through interpretation, reflection, and the act of artistic creation. Last question. Do you think that Daddy, a poem by Sylvia Plath, is a protest against patriarchy? Critically comment. 20-mark question. Answer. Sylvia Plath's Daddy is often interpreted as a personal and political outcry, and many critics read it as a protest against patriarchy, though the poem operates on multiple levels: psychological, historical, and feminist. At its core, Daddy combines the intensity of Plath's personal experience with her broader critique of male authority, dominance, and oppression, which are emblematic of patriarchal structures. The poem is framed as a highly charged confrontation with the figure of the father, who is both a literal presence and a symbolic representation of male authority. Plath's depiction of the father oscillates between reverence, fear, and violent resentment. By likening him to a colossus and an oppressive panzer man, she transforms the personal grief of loss into a broader indictment of patriarchal power. The hyperbolic, violent imagery, including Holocaust metaphors, reflects her perception of an insurmountable patriarchal figure whose influence is absolute and destructive. In this sense, the poem reads as a protest against male domination, emphasizing the emotional and psychological control that patriarchal authority can exert. Moreover, Plath extends the critique beyond her father to include the societal structures that perpetuate male dominance. Her assertion that she has died to him but is through with him signals a desire to reclaim agency and autonomy, key feminist concerns. The poem's confessional tone underscores the struggle of women to break free from oppressive structures, illustrating the personal cost of patriarchy. Through the dramatic use of first-person narrative, Plath universalizes her experience, transforming individual trauma into a symbolic rebellion against systemic male authority. However, it is important to note that Daddy is not a straightforward feminist manifesto. The poem is deeply rooted in Plath's psychological landscape and its provocative imagery, ranging from incestuous undertones to references to death and historical atrocities, can sometimes overshadow its political dimension. Critics argue that the poem's focus on violent catharsis and personal vengeance complicates its reading purely as a protest against patriarchy. Yet, even in its extreme dramatization, the poem articulates the broader struggle against the silencing and subjugation of women, making it a landmark in feminist literature. In conclusion, Daddy functions both as an intensely personal confrontation with the loss and as a symbolic critique of patriarchal oppression. While the poem's confessional and sometimes shocking imagery emphasizes psychological trauma, it simultaneously challenges the authority, control, and domination that patriarchal structures exert. Through its blend of personal anguish and universalization rebellion, Plath's work remains a powerful statement against male-dominated societal norms, cementing its status as both a literary and feminist protest. So thank you for watching the video. Subscribe me for more videos, and we'll meet you with the next video. By then, take care and goodbye.